You've been told these symptoms are just menopause, hormones, aging, something every woman goes through. And for a while, you believed it. Because what else could explain the dryness? The fatigue that doesn't lift no matter how much you sleep? The fog that makes you feel like you're not quite there? You brought it up at appointments. You described it as best you could. And every time, the answer was the same. It's hormonal. Your body is changing. This is what that transition looks like. And so you adjusted. You accepted it. You told yourself that this is just what this stage of life feels like. But something still doesn't feel right. Something underneath the explanation keeps nagging. Because the symptoms don't behave the way menopause symptoms are supposed to behave. They don't ease with time. They don't respond fully to what should be helping. They keep going. They shift. They lay on top of each other in ways that feel like more than just hormones. And here's what nobody tells you. Sometimes it's not just menopause. Sometimes there is something else happening underneath. Something your hormones are masking. Something that has been building quietly while everyone looked at the obvious explanation. Something your doctor may not have looked for yet. And that changes everything. If you are a woman in your 40s, 50s, or beyond, and you have been living with symptoms that feel bigger than menopause, this is for you. The dryness that isn't just dry skin. The exhaustion that isn't just poor sleep. The joint aches, the burning eyes, the mouth that feels like sandpaper by mid-morning. You mention it at appointments. And it gets brushed off. Not cruelly. Not dismissively on purpose. But efficiently. Because there is an explanation ready and waiting. You're told it's hormonal. You're told it's stress. You're told it's what happens at this stage of life and that most women experience some version of this. And you leave the appointment with that answer. But the answer doesn't sit right. Because something still doesn't add up. Because these symptoms keep going. They shift. They layer. They show up in combinations that feel less like a phase and more like a pattern. And they don't fully respond to what menopause treatments are supposed to fix. So you keep searching. And that search brought you here. These symptoms seem hormonal. And some of them are. But when you look closer, a different pattern starts to appear. One that isn't just about estrogen dropping. One that involves your immune system. Your inflammation levels. Your body's ability to protect its own moisture and nerve signals. There is a condition called Sjögren syndrome. It is one of the most common autoimmune conditions in the world and one of the least recognized. It affects the moisture-producing glands throughout the body. It is autoimmune, meaning the immune system begins attacking its own tissues. The glands that produce tears. The glands that produce saliva. And over time, the inflammation spreads to joints, nerves, and other systems throughout the body. And here's what makes it so difficult to catch. Its symptoms overlap almost perfectly with menopause. Dry eyes, dry mouth, fatigue, joint pain, brain fog, sleep disruption, nerve sensations. Every single one of these symptoms belongs to both conditions. So when menopause begins, and estrogen drops, Sjögren's can either emerge for the first time, or symptoms that were already quietly present begin to intensify. The hormonal shift acts like a trigger. Or like a magnifying glass. And what was manageable before suddenly becomes disruptive. And it gets missed. Over and over again. In appointments all over the world, every single day. Stay with me. Because this next part matters. You start noticing your eyes feel different. Not just tired. Scratchy. Burning. Like there is something in them that will not go away no matter how many times you blink. Some days they feel raw from the moment you wake up. The light bothers you more than it used to. Screens feel harsh. Bright rooms feel uncomfortable. By evening your vision is blurry and your eyes feel genuinely sore, like you have been staring into wind for hours. You try eye drops. They help for a few minutes and then the sensation comes back. You mention it. You're told it's dry eye syndrome. Or screen time. Or hormone fluctuation drying out your mucous membranes. And estrogen does play a role here. Estrogen supports tear film production. When it drops during menopause, the tear glands can produce fewer tears and the quality of the tear film can change. So this explanation makes sense on the surface. But in Sjögren's, something more is happening. The immune system is actively targeting the lacrimal glands, the glands that make tears. Inflammation builds inside the tissue itself. White blood cells infiltrate the gland. And over time, the glands lose their ability to function. Not because of hormone levels. Because they are being damaged from within. Eye drops help a little. But the problem keeps coming back. Because the drops are treating the surface, not the source. This is one of the most misinterpreted signs in women going through menopause. Because the overlap is almost exact. And because dry eyes feel like a minor complaint, it rarely triggers a deeper investigation. Type DIY in the comments if your eyes have been burning and no one has fully explained why. Your mouth feels different now. Not just thirsty. Sticky. Thick. Like there isn't enough moisture to speak comfortably or to eat without something to drink alongside every bite. Food tastes different. Spicy things feel more intense. Dry foods are difficult. Swallowing takes more effort than it used to. You wake up at night reaching for water, and by morning your lips are already dry before you have said a word. You mention it. You're told it's medication side effects. Or that dryness increases naturally with age. Or that mouth breathing during sleep is causing it. And sometimes those things are contributing. But in Sjögren's, the salivary glands are under immune attack. The same inflammatory process that affects the tear glands targets the saliva-producing glands. Lymphocytes accumulate in the gland tissue. Function declines. And when saliva production drops, it isn't just uncomfortable. Saliva protects the teeth from decay. It begins the digestive process. It buffers acid. It carries enzymes the body depends on. Without enough of it, the effects spread beyond just dryness. And when estrogen drops during menopause, it can accelerate this process in women who already have early immune involvement, because estrogen has a regulatory effect on immune activity, and when that regulation eases, inflammation in vulnerable tissue can increase. This is where people miss it. Because dry mouth feels like a minor symptom. Something to manage, not investigate. But it may be a signal of something deeper. But it doesn't stop there. You are tired in a way that sleep does not fix. You rest. You sleep 8 hours. You cancel plans to recover. You do everything right. And you wake up already exhausted. The tiredness is there before the day begins. By midday you feel like you have run a race you never agreed to enter. Simple tasks take longer. Your patience is thinner. Your body feels heavier than it should. And you cannot fully explain it to anyone who hasn't felt it, because it doesn't look like anything from the outside. You're told it's the hormone shift. Low estrogen affects energy. Low progesterone disrupts sleep architecture. The body is adjusting to a new normal. And yes, hormonal changes during menopause do affect energy. This is real and well documented. But in Sjögren's, the fatigue has a different driver. Chronic inflammation uses enormous amounts of the body's resources. The immune system in an active inflammatory state is working constantly, producing cytokines, signaling cells, maintaining a level of internal alert that the body was not designed to sustain indefinitely. It drains the body the way a phone drains when too many processes are running in the background all at once. You feel the result without being able to see the cause. And because the inflammation isn't always visible in standard blood work, CRP may be normal, white cell count may look fine, it gets missed. This isn't laziness. This isn't aging normally. This is your body working hard against something it cannot resolve on its own. Type tired in the comments if this kind of exhaustion has followed you for longer than you can explain. You walk into a room and forget why. Words disappear mid-sentence. You reach for a name, a word, a thought that was just there, and it is gone. Reading takes more effort than it used to. You reread the same paragraph and it still doesn't land. Conversations require active concentration in a way that feels new. And you feel like you are thinking through a layer of static. Like your mind is working but at a slower speed, through a filter you cannot remove. You're told it's hormonal brain fog. Estrogen supports serotonin, dopamine, and acetylcholine, neurotransmitters that affect memory, focus, and mood. When estrogen drops, cognition can be affected in real and measurable ways. That is true. But in Sjögren's, the brain fog may have an additional and separate cause. Research suggests that inflammatory cytokines, immune signaling molecules, may in some cases cross into the central nervous system. And when that happens, they can interfere with how clearly the brain processes, retrieves, and communicates information. There is also growing evidence of small fiber nerve involvement in Sjögren's that may contribute to cognitive symptoms. Which means the nervous system itself may be affected in ways that produce a fog that hormone therapy alone does not resolve. And because it feels identical to menopause brain fog on the surface, it is almost never flagged as something to investigate further. And this is where it gets worse. You cannot stay asleep. Or you fall asleep and wake 2 hours later, completely alert, with no clear reason. Sometimes there is a hot flash. But sometimes there is nothing, no obvious trigger, no discomfort you can name. You are just awake. And the hours pass slowly. And in the morning you are as tired as when you lay down. You're told it's the hormones. Disrupted estrogen and progesterone affect melatonin regulation and sleep architecture. Night waking is one of the most common complaints of perimenopause and menopause. And that is real. But in Sjögren's, there are additional physical reasons that sleep breaks. A mouth so dry it pulls you out of sleep reaching for water. Eyes too uncomfortable to stay closed for long stretches. Joint stiffness that builds during stillness and becomes painful enough to wake you. And inflammation itself has a rhythm. Inflammatory activity can increase in the early morning hours, which is why joint stiffness in inflammatory conditions is often worst on waking. The body registers this internal activity as a form of physiological stress. And it wakes. Sleep disruption in Sjögren's is not just a hormonal side effect. It is a symptom pattern of its own, with its own drivers that need their own attention. Type FOG in the comments if your sleep has been broken for months and nobody has connected it to anything deeper. Your joints hurt. Not consistently. Not in one place. They move. Hands one morning. Knees the next. Wrists, shoulders, ankles cycling through in ways that feel unpredictable. Some days there is stiffness that takes an hour of movement to work through. Some days the aching is just there, low and persistent, in the background of everything you do. You're told estrogen protects the joints. It has anti-inflammatory properties and supports the synovial lining. And when it drops, inflammation in the joint lining can increase. So this makes sense as a menopause symptom. But in Sjögren's, joint involvement is a recognized and documented pattern that is separate from hormonal change. It is not the progressive joint destruction of rheumatoid arthritis. But it is real, and it is inflammatory, and it is driven by immune activity. The same immune activation that targets the moisture glands can produce inflammation in joint tissue. And because estrogen was providing some natural anti-inflammatory support throughout reproductive life, when it drops, the immune inflammation that was being partially modulated begins to surface more clearly. This is not just aging joints responding to hormone loss. This is inflammation with an immune driver. This is a pattern. That's not the real problem. Something else is happening that is harder to name. Tingling in your hands or feet that comes without warning. Numbness in patches that moves or fades and returns somewhere else. A burning sensation on the surface of the skin that no cream or treatment relieves. Sensitivity to temperature, touch, or pressure that wasn't there before. You're told it might be circulation changes related to menopause. Or nerve compression from posture or weight changes. Or peripheral changes that happen naturally with age. But Sjögren's has a documented neurological component that is increasingly recognized in the research. Small fiber neuropathy, damage to the smallest and most delicate nerve fibers in the body, is found in a meaningful portion of Sjögren's patients. These are the fibers that carry sensory information. And when they are damaged by inflammation, they produce exactly the sensations you might be experiencing. Burning. Tingling. Heightened sensitivity. Areas of numbness. And small fiber neuropathy often does not show on standard nerve conduction studies, because those tests measure the large fibers. The damage to the small fibers requires a different kind of test, a skin punch biopsy, that most people are never offered. Which means the symptom gets dismissed. Or attributed to menopause and age. And it continues. This is where people miss it. And this is where the damage may already be building quietly. Type nerves in the comments if you have had sensations like burning, tingling, or numbness that no one has fully explained. Here's what matters most. Sjögren's is not an emergency overnight. But it is progressive. The immune system does not simply pause its activity because the condition has gone undiagnosed. When the glands are under immune attack for months or years without any intervention, the damage accumulates. Gland tissue can develop fibrosis, scarring. Function that is lost does not always return. And the symptoms that started manageable can become significantly more disruptive over time. Beyond the glands, untreated systemic inflammation carries its own longer-term implications for joints, nerves, and other organs. And the longer it is attributed to menopause alone, the longer the actual driver goes unaddressed. The longer the pattern continues without a name. This is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to give you language. Because language is what gets you heard in a medical appointment. If you walk in and say I feel dry and tired, you will likely be told it's hormonal. If you walk in and say, I want to rule out autoimmune causes. This doesn't feel purely hormonal. I would like further testing, including ANA, anti-SSA, and anti-SSB antibodies, and possibly a Sjögren's test for tear production and a salivary gland assessment. That is a different conversation. A conversation that can lead somewhere. You have the right to ask for it. And now you have the words to do it. Look at what we have covered. Dry eyes that drops don't fix. Dry mouth that water doesn't resolve. Fatigue that sleep cannot touch. Brain fog with no clear hormonal trigger. Sleep that breaks before it restores you. Joints that ache in a pattern that shifts and moves. Nerve sensations that no one has connected to anything. These are not just hormone symptoms. This is a pattern. A pattern that points toward the immune system. Toward chronic inflammation. Toward the moisture-producing and nerve-supporting systems of the body under prolonged stress. And estrogen has been sitting at the center of it, not as the cause, but as the thing that was keeping the pattern quieter than it should have been. When estrogen drops, the modulating effect it had on immune activity eases. And what was manageable becomes visible. And it changes how you see everything. Because now you are not just managing menopause. You are investigating whether something else has been happening alongside it. Quietly. For longer than you realized. Look at what women type in the comments on videos like this. Dry. Fog. Tired. Nerves. Finally. Hundreds of them. Women who spent years being told that what they felt was just menopause. Who adjusted and managed and accepted. Who found a name for their pattern much later than they should have. Who said, I wish someone had told me this sooner. You are not alone in this. And you are not wrong for questioning the explanation you were given. Your instinct that something more is happening deserves to be taken seriously. I put together a symptom map specifically for this overlap. It shows how estrogen changes and Sjögren's symptoms connect across the body systems. Which symptoms belong to which driver. Where the overlap lies and where the patterns begin to diverge. And what the combined picture looks like, so you can see your own experience more clearly and bring a clearer picture to your doctor. It is not a diagnosis tool. No resource outside of clinical testing can tell you whether you have Sjögren's. But it is the kind of organized, visual picture that helps you have a real and specific conversation instead of a general one. Type symptom map in the comments and I will share where you can access it. Before you go. There are early warning signs that appear before menopause begins. Signs that most women experience for years and dismiss as unrelated. Subtle changes in how dry eyes feel in different seasons. Worse in winter, worse in air conditioning, worse than other people seem to find it. Joint stiffness that comes and goes and seems to have no clear cause. A fatigue that started in the mid-30s and was written off as the pace of life. A dry mouth that appeared and was blamed on medication or dehydration but never fully resolved. These are the signals that precede the hormonal shift. The ones that, when looked at together, form a picture that predates menopause entirely. That is what I will show you next. The pattern that appears before the hormonal shift even starts. What it looks like in the years before perimenopause. And why recognizing it early changes the entire outcome. You were not imagining it. You were not being dramatic. You were not weak or oversensitive or simply struggling with aging in a way other women were managing better. You were noticing something real. Something that your body has been signaling for a long time in the only language it has, symptoms. You were doing exactly what you were supposed to do. Paying attention. Asking questions. Looking for answers. You were just never given the full picture. Until now. If this helped you understand something you have been carrying for a while, share it with someone who needs to hear it. A friend. A sister. Someone who has been told the same thing over and over and still doesn't feel right about the answer. And if you are watching this and you recognize yourself in what I described, type finally in the comments. Because that is what this is. A moment of finally making sense of something that never quite added up. I will see you in the next one.